All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at why so many international students are choosing German universities. We've got some pretty interesting data from the German Academic Exchange Service, ADDE, and yeah, they've released a snapshot survey. It shows a pretty big jump in those international student numbers for this winter semester.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, over 405,000 compared to like 379,939 last year. So that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, that's a substantial increase.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think a lot of people are interested in. So let's kind of unpack what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. What I find really interesting is that this growth isn't just like a one-time thing. We're seeing an increase in new international students, too, first years, up to 88,000 from 82,323 last year. So that seems like more of a trend than just a temporary surge.
Okay, yeah, so that's a lot of new faces on campus. But how does that compare to the overall enrollment in Germany?
Well, we got some data on that, too. From the Federal Statistical Office of Germany, it looks like total student enrollment, including both domestic and international students, is at 2,871,600. So it's a very small increase from last year, only 0.1%. But, this is after a pretty big peak enrollment. Back in 2021-2022, that winter semester saw 2,946,100 students.
So maybe things are stabilizing a bit. I mean, after that really intense growth, do you think it's possible that all these new international students are offsetting a potential decline in domestic enrollment?
That's an interesting thought. Definitely
Yeah.
something to consider. I mean, even though the overall numbers seem kind of stable, the composition of the student body is definitely changing.
Right, yeah, it's like a changing of the guard in German higher education. But where are all these new students coming from? The survey highlights some pretty big increases from India, Turkey, Iran, Ukraine, and Pakistan.
Hmm. Now, you've looked into, global migration patterns a lot, haven't you? Does this align with what you're seeing in those countries? Do you think it's mostly economic factors, or are there other things at play?
That's a good point. Makes me think about, all the push and pull factors involved. I mean, obviously, economic conditions in those countries are important, but there's got to be more to it than that. Maybe changes in visa policies. Or even just, the perception of Germany as a welcoming place for international students. What do you think?
It's probably a combination of a lot of things.
Mhm.
Economic opportunity is obviously a huge driver, especially for students coming from emerging economies. But political stability is important too, and just the general perception of safety. Plus, Germany has a great reputation for high-quality education and research.
Right, so all that combined makes it a pretty attractive destination. So it sounds like Germany's really winning this global war for talent.
Yeah.
What's their strategy compared to other countries like Canada or the UK? Are they actively trying to make themselves more appealing, or is this just happening organically?
Well, I think Germany has been making a real effort to attract skilled workers and international students,
Mhm.
especially in recent years. They've made some policy changes to make it easier for international graduates to stay and work in the country, and they've been really promoting German universities abroad.
So it's a deliberate strategy then, not just a coincidence.
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. The survey also found that there were actually fewer students from Syria, Austria, and Russia this year. What do you think explains that shift?
Hmm. Well, the decline from Syria is probably linked to the ongoing conflict there
Yeah.
and the humanitarian crisis. It's just become a lot harder for Syrian students to pursue higher education abroad.
That makes sense. What about Austria and Russia?
It's tough to say for sure. For Austria, maybe it's changes in tuition policies
Hmm.
or just, students choosing different destinations. And for Russia, well, the geopolitical tensions since the invasion of Ukraine might be playing a role.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor to consider. It seems like we're seeing this really complex interplay of global events and political decisions and just individual student choices. This is already getting more nuanced than I expected. Another interesting finding from the survey was the big increase in master's program enrollments. More than half the universities reported an increase, and only 16% saw a decline.
It does seem like German master's programs are becoming more and more popular with international students. Maybe because of the quality and specialization they offer.
Yeah, I think so. It definitely shows a preference for advanced studies in Germany. But even with all this success, there are still some challenges, right? The survey uncovered some pretty significant obstacles for international students.
Oh, definitely. Even though Germany is becoming a more attractive destination, there's still work to do to make the experience better for international students.
Hmm.
The universities identified several key challenges.
Okay, let's hear about those. What's the biggest concern?
Well, 83% of universities said that difficulties with entry policies and visa processes are a big hurdle. And we're not talking about small inconveniences here. These are serious roadblocks for students who have chosen to study in Germany.
83% is a pretty stark number. Can you give us some specific examples of the kinds of visa issues these students are running into?
Sure. Some of the most common problems are long processing times for visa applications. And the documentation requirements are often really complex and confusing. Plus, it's hard to find clear information about the process. Imagine getting accepted to your dream program and then being stuck in visa limbo for months, not even knowing if you'll be able to start on time. That's got to be incredibly stressful.
Absolutely. I can see how that would be a major deterrent.
Yeah, for sure. It's not even just about getting into the country in the first place. Some students have trouble extending their visas later or switching to a different kind of visa, like if they want to stay in Germany and work after they graduate.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes sense. So Germany might be great at attracting students, but what about keeping them there afterwards? Are there enough opportunities for those graduates to actually use their skills in Germany? Is it easy for them to go from student life to professional life?
That's a really important point, and I think that's where Germany still has some room for improvement. I mean, they've made some progress, but some graduates still struggle to find jobs that match their qualifications. And then there's the whole work permit process. And of course, the language barrier can be a challenge in the workplace.
Right, so it's not a smooth transition for everyone. Okay, so we've got the visa issues. What other challenges did the survey highlight?
Well, another big one is affordable housing. 75% of universities said that's a major problem for international students.
Wow, 75%.
Yeah, it's a big one.
I bet that's especially bad in the bigger cities.
You're absolutely right. Places like Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, they've got housing shortages, rents are going up. It's just really hard to find affordable places to live, especially for students coming from abroad.
So not only are these students adjusting to a new country and a whole new academic system, but they're also struggling to find a place to live. And on top of that, it probably has to be really cheap, too.
It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly overwhelming.
And it's not just about having a place to sleep, you know.
Yeah.
It's about feeling settled, like you belong, like you're part of the community. If you're constantly stressed about where you're going to live, it's hard to focus on your studies and really experience everything Germany has to offer.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference. Okay, so we've got visa problems, housing problems. What else is on the list?
Well, the survey also found that 69% of universities see the overall cost of living as a barrier for international students.
Right, because even though tuition might be relatively low in Germany,
Exactly.
everything else adds up.
It does. Accommodation, food, transportation, healthcare. It gets expensive.
And for students coming from countries with weaker currencies.
Yeah.
Or just lower average incomes, it's got to be a huge financial burden. But hasn't Germany been trying to do something about this? I mean, I know they launched that skilled labor initiative back in November.
They did in November 2023. It was a joint effort by the DAAD and the Federal Ministry of Education and Research.
Remind me what that initiative's all about and what kind of impact it's having.
Well, it's basically a big push to attract international students and graduates and then help them qualify for the German job market. They're putting a lot of money into it, almost 120 million, and it's supposed to run until 2028. So far, 104 universities are getting extra support through this initiative. They started getting that help at the beginning of this year.
So it sounds like they're really serious about making this work. What does that support actually look like, though? What are they doing to help these international students?
It's a pretty wide range of things. There are orientation programs before students even arrive, help with visa applications, job search support, even intercultural training. They're really trying to help students at every stage, from deciding to study in Germany all the way to finding a job after graduation.
Wow, that's impressive. It's like a comprehensive support system. But is it enough? I mean, I know the DAAD president, Joybrada Mukherjee, he's been pretty vocal about the need to do more for international students.
Yeah, he has. He made some comments when the survey came out. He emphasized how important it is to create more affordable housing options for students. He's calling for more investment in student housing, especially in those high-demand areas. He's arguing that affordable housing is absolutely crucial, not just for the students themselves, but for Germany's overall attractiveness as a place for global talent.
That makes a lot of sense. If Germany wants to compete for the best and brightest, they need to offer an environment that's both supportive and affordable. It's not just about getting people there, it's about making them want to stay.
Exactly.
But do you think these efforts are driven purely by economic concerns, or is there something more to it?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, economic competitiveness is a big factor, but I think there's also a growing recognition of the social and cultural benefits of having a diverse student body. International students bring new perspectives. They make campus life more interesting. And they help promote intercultural dialogue.
Right. It's about creating a more vibrant and inclusive society. I'm starting to see this influx of international students as more than just an educational trend. It's almost like a driver of social change.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's about breaking down barriers, building understanding between cultures.
Okay, so we've talked about the reasons behind this surge in international student enrollment, the challenges they face, and the efforts Germany is making to support them. But let's zoom out for a second. What does this trend mean for the global picture of higher education and the workforce? I mean, Germany's not the only country experiencing this, right?
You're right. It's a global phenomenon.
So what happens when more and more international students choose Germany? Does it create this ripple effect that impacts universities around the world?
I think it does. Other countries are paying attention. They're realizing they need to step up their game if they want to attract and keep those international students.
So it's this global competition for talent. What are some of the things other countries are doing to stay competitive?
Well, we're seeing a lot of scholarships and financial aid packages specifically for international students. And some countries are trying to make their visa processes easier. They're working on creating more welcoming environments, places where students from different backgrounds can feel comfortable and supported.
It sounds like everyone's trying to crack the code, figure out the magic formula to attract the best and brightest from all over the world. What about the impact on the global workforce, though? How does this influx of international students affect things on a larger scale?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, once these students graduate, they have choices to make. They can stay in their host country and join the workforce there, or they can go back home with all these new skills and experiences.
So some countries gain brains, others gain circulation,
Exactly.
and the ones who go back home, they can bring new ideas and approaches.
They can. They can be real catalysts for innovation and development.
It's like this global exchange of knowledge,
It is.
and all driven by student mobility.
Pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. And then there's the cultural enrichment too, right? Having all these international students and workers,
Absolutely.
it broadens everyone's perspectives, creates more understanding between cultures.
And ultimately, it makes for a more vibrant and inclusive society.
Right. It's not just about universities and workplaces.
Right.
It's about the whole community.
Exactly.
So for our listener out there who's probably thinking, this is all very interesting, but what does it have to do with me?
Good question.
What would you say to them?
I'd say it's a reminder that the world is changing. Education and work aren't limited by national borders anymore.
Right.
The choices students make today have ripple effects. They impact the global talent pool, innovation, economic development.
We're all connected.
We are.
What happens in one part of the world can have a huge impact on the rest of us.
And understanding these trends is important. It helps us make better decisions, be more active participants in this changing world.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the rise of international students at German universities, the reasons behind it, the challenges, and the potential impact on the world. But I want to leave our listener with one final thought, one more question to ponder. We talked about all the factors identified in the survey: visas, housing, cost of living. But what else might be contributing to this increase in international students choosing Germany? What's beyond the obvious?
That is a good question. It makes you think outside the box a bit. Think about the things that aren't always so obvious.
Right. Like, what about Germany's reputation, in things like engineering and technology and all that research? Could that be a big draw? Or maybe it's their focus on sustainability and renewable energy, attracting students who are really passionate about tackling those big global challenges.
Yeah, I think those are definitely big factors. Germany's always had that, that strong reputation in those fields.
Yeah.
And their commitment to sustainability is pretty well known all over the world. So for students who are looking for those, those cutting edge research opportunities, or they want to be part of a country that's leading the way in green energy, Germany's a pretty good choice.
Yeah. It's like Germany's becoming this hub for innovation.
Yeah.
And all those students want to be where the action is.
Exactly. And it's not just about the academics either. Germany has a lot to offer culturally, too. You've got those historic cities, a really vibrant art scene, beautiful natural landscapes. For a lot of students, studying abroad is about more than just, hitting the books. It's about personal growth and experiencing a new culture.
Right. It's about the whole package. And Germany definitely delivers on that front.
Oh, for sure. And we can't forget about Germany's social safety net and that commitment to affordable health care. I think that can be a really big draw for students who are coming from countries that don't have those things.
Yeah, that sense of security is huge. especially when you're so far away from home.
Exactly. It all comes down to this, choosing where to study abroad is a really personal decision. There are so many factors to consider. Academic goals, personal preferences, practical stuff. It's like putting a puzzle together, trying to find that perfect fit.
And it seems like Germany's doing a pretty good job of making their puzzle pieces really attractive.
I think they are. They're investing in international students, and they're creating a really diverse and talented student body as a result.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the rise of international students at German universities. We explored the reasons behind it, the challenges those students face, and the potential impact on the whole world. But before we go, I want to encourage you all to keep thinking about this. Don't just stop with what we talked about today. Go beyond the data. Think about the personal stories, the individual journeys, the cultural exchanges. What can you learn from this global movement of students?
It's a fascinating phenomenon, and it's constantly changing. Staying informed is key to understanding the forces shaping our world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep those minds curious.